Online piano lessons are more popular than ever, but there are very few resources out there for both students and teachers when it comes to picking out the best USB mic for you and for piano in particular. I hope to solve your problems today with a very in-depth look and review at 6 of the top USB mic models recommended to me by professional piano teachers from around the world. They range in price from only $60 US to $250. Are the more expensive models worth it? Can we hear a difference in quality? Do they feel durable and well built? And how easy are they to use? And do the added features of the more expensive ones really benefit us? In this shootout, I'll be demoing the FiFine K678 podcasting mic. I can't help but think of Mozart every time I say that, the name of that microphone. The blue Snowball, the blue Yeti, the Audio Technica ATR 2500X, the AKG Lyra, and the Shure MV51. All of these microphones fall into the category of USB mics, so they should all be plug and play, easy to use, easy to interface directly into any video conferencing app like Zoom or any other platform that you use to teach or to take lessons. I'll be playing 2 short examples into each mic, the beginning of a Schubert sonata and also a contemporary classical piece that I composed, and I'll record each mic in 2 different positions. One that gives the piano priority, and when it's that position, it'll be kind of in the crook of the piano out in this direction. And then another position that attempts to balance speaking voice and piano, because that's very important in piano lessons. And in those cases, I'll have the mic up here on the music rack and pointed generally in my direction here on the bench. To close out the demonstrations, I'll also play the same examples through my studio grade mics and gear that I use to teach online. So you're gonna get a direct comparison to how $10,000 of gear compares to these extremely affordable USB mics. Now, before we jump in, all of the audio presented here is available for you to download directly if you'd like to do any extra comparison. Plus, the download link that's in the description below also includes an example of every single polar pattern or setting on the microphones. In this video that you're watching, I've included my favorite setting for each mic and for us to talk about, but some of the mics have 4 settings or 5 choices. I can't present all of them in video form unless this video is going to be 2 hours long. So if you'd like to hear all of those choices or specific ones, be sure and click that link in the description below and you can download audio for every setting, including what the mics sound like after they've been processed by Zoom. All right, here we go. This is a voice test for the FiFine K678 microphone, and I think this is in a position that most students and teachers would have a microphone in for lessons, whether it's on a grand piano or an upright or even on a digital piano. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. All right, first up we have the FiFine K678. My first reaction to this mic actually has to do with the box and the packaging. It is seriously good. It's almost as good as how Apple packages their products, if you're familiar with those. The foam insert inside the box is very padded and soft. It's great protection for the mic. I would love to put this mic back away and in that box, either for travel or for safekeeping, whatever that happens to be. Now, the microphone itself feels really nice and solid. It's got a nice weight to it. It's all metal construction. That's really nice. The base and the swivel here are very easy to use. You can easily loosen these knobs on the side, get the mic in position, and it stays exactly where you put it. The base also has these little rubber feet on the bottom of it across this little triangle base, right? Now, these are super important if you plan to place your mic on an instrument, not just to protect the finish of your piano, but also, we know that sound travels through air, but sound also travels through objects, especially our pianos. It vibrates, right? Now, these tiny little feet actually do a remarkably good job of taming those vibrations so that they don't leak into the sound the capsule in here is capturing. The sound quality of this mic is remarkably good, especially considering the price at only $60 US, which is at the time of this video. The tone of the mic does tend to be slightly nasal sounding for piano. It's pushed a little bit in the mids, and it doesn't have great bass response when it's more than a foot away from a sound source, which it's going to be when we're miking piano. But that kind of response is actually typical for almost all cardioid pattern mics, including extremely expensive studio grade ones. The gain knob on the microphone itself needs to be turned up far more than the other mics tested in this review. I actually used it at about halfway up for all of the tests. But for this use case, where we have a really loud instrument near the mic, I actually found that to be helpful because we get a little bit more resolution when we're in the middle of the knob than we do all the way at one end or the other. So it needs a bit more gain, but that didn't add too much noise to the sound of this microphone. Now, there is some self-noise, or hiss, in other words. I'll score it at a 6 out of 10, where 0 would be unusably hissy or noisy, and 10 would be perfectly quiet. So a 6 out of 10 for this mic. It also doesn't have some of the extra features other products on this list have, like extra polar patterns or onboard EQ and things like that. But it's a very, very solid choice, and overall a very good sounding choice and an incredible bang for the buck at only $60 US. This is a voice test for the blue Snowball. It's in a position that I think most students and teachers would use, whether they have a grand piano, an upright, or even a digital. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. We have the blue Snowball. It is priced at $70 US as of the time of this video. It has a few options that the FiFine microphone that we reviewed first doesn't have. First off, on the back here, there's a 3-way selector switch right up here on the back of the mic, above where you plug in the USB cable. Right? This allows you to actually switch between a kind of like a wide cardioid pattern with the switch all the way to the left. In the middle, the switch adds in a 10 decibel pad to the wide cardioid pattern, so that makes it a little less sensitive to loud sounds. And then on the right, it actually switches the mic over to omnidirectional mode. So it's nice to have these added features packed into a mic at this low of a price point. but I feel like Blue has cut some corners to help save some money in other places. So first of all, the body of the mic itself, it's just plastic. It looks kind of nice because it's that, you know, high gloss finish, but it feels really cheap to hold. Even the stand for it feels nicer than the microphone itself. Now, speaking of the stand, the legs here do not have rubberized feet. I didn't hear a thudding problem in the recordings that I made, but I really would have liked to see some rubber here, or some foam or something like that. The spot where this mic mounts to this little tripod stand, you can unscrew this and you can mount the mic directly on a standard microphone stand with a 5/8 inch thread. So that's a nice little touch. But where it connects here, there's this little ball joint. Where it connects here feels incredibly cheap. So this is where the microphone tilts, and it's squeaky. It's very hard to move, and I feel like because the microphone is plastic, one, now that I've touched it, I've gotten all kinds of fingerprints all over it, and two, I feel like I'm going to break something because it actually requires quite a lot of push. I don't like handling my microphones like that at all. It just feels like I have to be really rough with something that's actually pretty delicate inside. So that in itself does not inspire confidence for me. Now, moving on to sound quality, both the cardioid and the omni capture modes sound muffled. They also even with the 10 decibel pad engaged, they seem to be prone to distortion. So in each of the clips I played, the mic levels peaked about 5 decibels below where clipping or distortion would happen on a recording, and yet it's all over the recordings. And it's not just where the playing is the loudest, but it's also throughout the range of playing. Even where things are softer, there's this muffled clipping and distortion type sound. For a self-noise score, I give this mic actually 2 different ratings. A 5 out of 10 in cardioid mode, it's pretty noisy, but a 7 out of 10 in omni mode. So in cardioid mode, not as good as the FiFine. In omni mode, just a little bit better. I really wanted to like this microphone more because I usually really like Blue Microphone's professional products, but this distortion, at least for me anyway, it automatically takes this mic out of the running of being a good choice. Now, if you own a Blue Snowball and you don't have these problems, please leave a comment below. I mean, I may have just gotten a lemon, but that is a valuable part of reviewing these products. This is a voice test for the Blue Yeti microphone. It's in its leftmost polar pattern on the selector. It looks like a wide cardioid or like a wide stereo polar pattern. And this is the position and about the distance I'd expect most students and teachers to be using this microphone. And I'm also talking in about the same volume that I'd expect if I were teaching. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Next up is the Blue Yeti. This mic sells for $130 US as of the time of this video, and what a difference an extra $60 makes. The build quality of the microphone itself, the bass, the swivel, this is all metal and it's all very nice. The tilt angle is super easy to adjust with these two knobs on the side. Very, very easy to move around and then to lock into place with these two knobs. The bottom of the bass is very much covered in a rubber-ish foam material. So it's not gonna scratch anything, and it's also gonna protect your sound from thudding or any other kind of rumble like that, right? So overall, this feels like a very professional product. The microphone can also come off the bass here and can be directly mounted to a standard 5/8 inch mic stand. You can see right down there the connection for that. The Yeti is the first mic on our list that actually is a stereo microphone. And it actually has 3 capsules inside this little dome that listen to you. So because of that, we get a 4 polar pattern selector on the back of the microphone. This knob right here. Polar pattern is simply how the microphone hears the sound around it. So the leftmost selection right now, it looks like 2 interlocking rings, but it's actually simply a left and right stereo signal. Now in the audio clips, the examples, I called it a wide cardioid pattern because the diagram in the booklet actually makes it look like that, but it's actually a stereo signal. This signal, the leftmost on the dial, is my favorite setting for this mic because stereo sound for instrument recording is very important. The tonality of this mic is nicely balanced. It's a bit weak in the bass again, but like I mentioned before, this is pretty expected, even in studio grade cardioid pattern microphones. Now the other polar patterns we can switch through in order are Omni, which is hearing everything around the mic. Now you might think that this would be a better choice for piano, but the tone here gets a bit muddy and we lose the stereo signal, so we only get a mono output. And it just doesn't sound as good most of the time. After that, we can select a simple cardioid or a directional pattern. So it just hears in one direction, kind of if the microphone is sitting here, kind of like that. And lastly, we can select a figure 8 pattern on the back. This opens up both the front of the microphone and the back of the microphone to sound, and it eliminates sound coming from the sides. Now it's doubtful that we'd ever use a figure 8 setting in a piano and teaching environment. And also, like most inexpensive figure 8 pattern mics, the tone gets very nasal and muddy at the same time. For a self-noise score, I give the Yeti a 9 out of 10. That's incredibly close to silent. There's a tiny bit of noise there, but it's very nearly inaudible. Overall, I love this mic. It's very versatile, it's well built, and it is easily worth the $130 that it costs. This is a voice test for the Audio Technica ATR 2500X. It's in a position that I think most students and teachers would use for online lessons. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Up next is the Audio Technica ATR 2500X. Now this mic sells for about $120 US as of the time of this video. Unlike the Yeti that we just talked about, this mic is all about giving you the best, but with only a single polar pattern. This mic is cardioid only. So in a sense, we can directly compare it to the FiFine K678 that we talked about first. This microphone is well built, and aesthetically it looks a lot like Audio-Technica's other studio microphones. So that is pretty cool. The mic here actually screws onto this tripod-like base down here, and the base itself folds up into this super nice and thin design. That's great. So this mic is fantastic in the area of portability. Now I wasn't super pleased with my ability to position this mic on its base. It seemed like it just didn't want to stay angled in any direction. It just kind of wants to, if you see that, it just kind of wants to fall back to where it hits the end point here. So of course you could find workarounds for this in your house or in your studio, but it would have been nice to have a bit more flexibility with positioning this included right with the mic. Tonally, this mic has a more refined sound than the K678. It's more balanced throughout its frequency range. Compared to the cardioid setting of the Blue Yeti, this mic tends to be a bit harsh sounding in the 2000 to 3000 hertz range. Now on the piano, that equates to the fundamental tones of about the uppermost 2 octaves or so, but if you know your acoustics, you also know that those frequencies exist in every note on the piano. I'll give it a 9 out of 10 for self-noise, just like the Yeti. Just a tiny bit there, but almost completely silent. While I don't love the missing features, and especially I would want a stereo option on this mic, if you're looking for a very simple setup, just plug and play setup, no extra buttons or knobs or anything like that, this is a very solid choice. This is a voice test for the AKG Lyra. It is now in wide stereo mode, and it's about a placement and distance that I think most teachers and students of piano would use. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Up next, we have the AKG Lyra. This mic sells for $150 US at the time of this video. Similar to the Blue Yeti, this is a multi-capsule stereo microphone. The Yeti had 3 capsules. This AKG Lyra actually uses 4. Now the first setting on the microphone as far as polar patterns go, the first setting is called front mode, and it's most similar to just a simple cardioid pattern. You don't get a stereo output, just mono. The second mode is called front and back mode. It's similar to an omnidirectional pattern, so hearing all around the mic. It's again not in stereo, just in mono. The third and the fourth options are actually called tight stereo and wide stereo. And these 2 options really are a stereo output. So tight stereo is the closest comparison to the Blue Yeti's first and only stereo mode. When we compare the tone of those two mics together, set on similar settings, the Lyra, this mic, has a narrower stereo image, so it sounds closer to being mono than stereo. And it's also got a bit of a beefier sound, a little heavier sound, if you will. Now we changed the mode of the Lyra to wide stereo, and the stereo image actually stays just as narrow as it was in tight stereo, and the tone gets even more heavy. Now this mic is well built, it's easy to adjust with the knobs on the side, it looks lovely. I actually love the way it looks. I like it quite a bit. And the mic can be removed from the base and attached to a standard 5/8 inch thread microphone stand. It also has a huge amount of rubberized foam on the bottom of the base. Now, unfortunately, this soft bottom doesn't do nearly as good of a job as others that we've looked at for isolating resonance and thud from the capsules that are inside here. On all of the sound tests I did while this mic stood on the music rack here, I could hear every key hit the bottom of the key bed. And the piano itself seemed to be setting off some kind of resonant tone inside the microphone. It was like humming on a certain frequency. It didn't happen when the mic was over there in the crook of the piano, but it is all over the sound when the mic is sitting on the music rack. Now, on top of this issue, in order to keep this mic from distorting and clipping, I had to record it with very, very little gain and then boost it a lot in post. I mean, sometimes over 10 decibels of boost in post. 10 decibels is double the volume, just to keep it from clipping. Now that kind of boosting is something that you can't do when you're working right in Zoom or live on any platform. So for a company like AKG that's steeped in decades of microphone production, and they make some of the best studio grade mics money can buy, I was expecting a much better product here. It's kind of like the blue Snowball earlier. If you own a Lyra and you don't experience these problems, feel free, leave a comment below. Maybe I got a lemon, but in this case, I think this one's part of the design. This is a voice test for the Shure MV51. Right now it is in the flat response mode. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. All right, that brings us to our final mic of the 6, the Shure MV51. This mic sells for $250, making it easily the most expensive microphone on this list. First off, this looks small, but man, it's heavy. It feels like I'm holding a tank, which is actually kind of nice. I like that. I like that a lot. It inspires confidence, unlike the Snowball earlier that was all plastic, right? Now this little peg on the back here, this swings out and becomes the stabilizer leg for the mic. And both the leg here on the bottom and the bottom of the mic itself have nice thick rubber where they'd meet a surface. So that's great. Because this mic isn't suspended between two locking wheels like many of our others, positioning it leaves us with some limited choices. The good news is that the end cap here on the mic can actually be unscrewed, and then you can attach this mic directly to a standard mic stand. This mic is cardioid only, which puts it in a similar camp as the very inexpensive FiFine K678 and the middle-of-the-road Audio Technica ATR 2500X. So, why does this mic cost 4 times the K678 and 2 times the ATR 2500X? Well, inside here, there's actually a mini computer that does some extra processing. So the different mode selectors on this mic don't change polar pattern. They actually change the EQ curve a little bit and dynamic compression. So reducing our dynamic range just a little bit. And that is through basically onboard software. Now, for our purposes in this video, I found that the best mode was simply the flat mode, which has no EQ or compression added to it, which means, again, for our purposes in recording piano, teaching piano, taking piano lessons online, this mic ends up being no better than the FiFine K678 or the Audio Technica ATR 2500X. There is a subtle sonic difference between this and the Audio Technica, but I wouldn't say it's better or worse, it's just different. In the box, you do get a handful of USB adapters, including one that'll plug this mic right into a lightning port, like on your iPhone, but I wouldn't go spending an extra $100 for cables that I could just pick up on Amazon for $5 or $10. So this is a great mic by Shure, and it does sound very nice, and it has very little self-noise. I would give it a 9 out of 10 again, but the added features just don't benefit our use case here. This is a voice test of the Shure SM7B. Of course, unlike the other microphones we've demoed here, I'm talking right into this one at a very, very close distance. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. So do we have a winner? I made this video so that you could make up your own mind about what's best for you, but that said, if I were to pick one mic out of the set and recommend it, it would be the Blue Yeti. The stereo option on the Yeti makes this mic incredibly versatile. Having that option means that you can actually make a great recording of your piano at home anytime that you aren't on Zoom or another video conferencing app. So let's say as a teacher, you want to make a demonstration recording for a student. It's going to sound far better in stereo than in simple mono like most of the other mics here. Whereas a student, maybe you need to make a video recording for your end of year recital or something like that. Again, the stereo option here makes this a great choice. Then, when you need to be hooked up to Zoom or whatever app you use for lessons, you can just click the selector knob over to cardioid setting and you're going to get a really great quality mono audio feed that's perfect for Zoom. The rumble protection, if we'll call it that, the rumble protection built into the bass here is much, much better than the Lyra. And for only $130, the sound quality that this gets you, I'd say it's about 90% of the way toward the studio quality setup that I demoed for you earlier. And that's where I run my audio feeds through over $10,000 of gear. That is fantastic bang for the buck. If you're interested in the Yeti or in any of the other mics that were tested here, there are Amazon links below in the description. They are affiliate links, so if you click them and you make a purchase, I do get a small commission on that. It's a great way at no extra cost to you to help support my channel here. One final aside for those of you who are still here, no, I didn't spend $10,000 on gear to teach piano lessons. I actually have worked as a professional audio engineer for almost 2 decades. So I happen to have a whole bunch of gear, and I use what I already own when I teach piano lessons online. I hope you found this video helpful. Remember to practice smarter, not harder, and I'll see you next time you visit Pianist Academy.